As he made his way to the inn to meet Rell, the Weasel pondered over its very existence. When military groups from Braston were sent through Crowwater to round up and execute the Tainted, they were housed in this inn. It was the only building that had any sort of maintenance invested into it. The kill squads that swept through and brutalised the town needed to be comfortable after all. Most of the year the place was empty bar a couple of guards that were smart enough not to rock the boat. The Weasel grinned at himself, as he often did, at his own efforts to keep the waters churning, making what lay beneath impossible to see. Smart guards lived longer in Crowwater. And a smart guard was a quiet one. A truth dawned on him in that moment of distraction. He had overlooked a detail. He chided himself. Attention to detail was what gave him his power. From their initial meeting, the Weasel had assumed that Rell had called himself the Waster as some kind of weird boast. After analysing their conversation, the Weasel realised something about the man. "How could I be so blind?" His companion shot him a confused glance, but the Weasel ignored him and continued his train of thought. He didn't know what the term Waster meant, but it was said in a manner that indicated he should have known. Rell expected him to understand what the term meant. This Rell had a reputation further south, the Weasel surmised. One strong enough to think the name the Waster would open a door here. "He hates the name," the Weasel said out loud. Rell would have only used it to introduce himself to a well-known smuggler if it held some negative connotation everywhere else. This Rell was a good boy, the Weasel thought. Yes, a good boy who's seen some bad things. And now he thinks he is made of iron. His companion was ignoring him now. He was used to the Weasel speaking his thoughts out and knew better than to interject. The Weasel had nothing against magic users himself. He saw them the same way he saw everyone else. People are opportunities, entertainment, a way to create a little meaning or joy in life. They were livestock meant to feed the smarter species. That's how kings saw them, so that's how the Weasel saw them. Some of the livestock held more value than others, and Rell, the Waster, as he called himself, was more entertaining than most. The Weasel snorted at the ridiculousness of the name, and then started just laughing maniacally at the ridiculousness of his own title. That's when they cracked the door to the inn where he was meeting them. The inn wasn't worthy of its own name. For some reason he found this even funnier, and as he entered the room he was grabbing his sides from laughing, now borderline hysterical at the craziness of life. The few people in the room stopped what they were doing and looked up at the two men who entered. The two guards in the corner, two smart guards, went back to their quiet game of Canistar. At the other table was the good boy and two others. The Weasel composed himself, wiping tears from his eyes with the occasional little giggle at his own humour. Before anyone at the table could speak, the Weasel instructed them to follow him. They followed. Sheep always do, he thought. One of the games the Weasel liked to play was seeing how far he could push certain situations. This is why he set up his base of operations directly underneath the inn that the Braston Guard housed its military unit. When this wasn't discovered, he went a step further and made a secret door where you could access it directly from inside the building. A lot of guards mysteriously died during this part of construction. The Weasel started laughing again. The three following him looked at each other confused. Sheep were always confused, the Weasel mused. At least these were colourful sheep. He led them into a back room. It was an unusual space. It seemed like a simple storage area with the exception of a potted plant growing against the wall. Before anyone could ask what they were doing in the room, the Weasel plucked a flower from the plant and placed it in the empty flower pot. After a moment, the wall itself started to pull away, exposing a tunnel leading underground. The group was stunned as they made their way underneath the inn into what was clearly the Weasel's headquarters. "Before you ask, it's because I can," the Weasel explained, as he had no doubt they would start questioning him about his choice of locating his base of operations within a sniffing distance of the Braston military. He smiled at them. "Please sit." He took this moment to assess the three of them. Rell he already had figured. There was a dark-skinned woman as well, a Scorian, he thought. He had not travelled that far south to be certain, but by the look of her clothes, nor had she for a while. No, she had either fled Scoria or was born in the north. The other man sat down as if he owned the space. He pulled a sack of weed out of his pocket, then filled and lit a pipe. Interesting choice. The smoking man had the same damaged look in his eyes as the waster. The difference was the blue eyes of the pipe smoker were sharp and angry. He hadn't handled his situation as well, it seems. Everyone except the Weasel's companion sat down at the table. There was more wealth in this one room than the entirety of Crowwater. "What a merry little band of adventurers," the Weasel said. It was difficult to tell his level of sincerity. "So, Rell, you said you would need papers for 2 people, not 3. "That's true," Rell said. "Elan is here for your coin." The Weasel looked skeptical. Elan explained that she just needed to sketch the runes that were etched on it and didn't need to take the coin itself. "Runic magic is from Scoria," Rell continued. "Elan will have contacts she can source while we head into Braston. You will get the information on the coin when we return to Crowwater." The Weasel wasn't keen on this idea as it left him with no exit strategy if things went awry. Rell could see his hesitation, so added, "You have nothing to lose if you abandon us on this quest. You'll be in the exact position you are now, except with a couple more people inclined to kill you. Something a man of your position is no doubt already accustomed to. If it succeeds, you will know more about your coin than it just getting warm when someone does a little cantrip." The Weasel thought on this a moment, and the man was right. He could slip away from this lot at any point and be back where he had started, no risk of loss other than time. If they succeeded, who knows what secrets he would discover about his coin. "Before all that, I know what you can do," he pointed a finger at Rell. "But what do you do?" He moved his finger towards the pipe-smoking man who, up until this point, just stared at him with those piercing blue eyes puffing smoke. The smoking man raised a mimicking finger in response, mirroring the Weasel's behaviour, and pointed it towards him, then moved it towards his companion. After a breath, the Weasel's companion started to lift off the ground. At the same time, the coin in the Weasel's pocket didn't just heat up, it started to burn. "Reaver scars!" the Weasel cursed as he jumped from his chair and scrambled to get the coin out of his pockets. It burnt his fingers as he did, and he almost threw it on the table where it hissed into the timber with a little trail of smoke. The man lowered his finger and the Weasel's companion came back to the floor. Not sure what to do, he stood very still. The Weasel also seemed frozen in place, looking at the three across the table with newfound respect. Only Rell wasn't smiling. "Xeno is the most powerful Onus user you have ever encountered," Rell said. "The best users in the world can only lift and move themselves a short distance, and don't have a hope of shifting another life form, not even a rat. Xeno here could mush your companion into the wall like a fine paste without taking the pipe out of his mouth." In response, Xeno leaned back into his chair and continued to puff on his pipe. "Not sheep after all," the Weasel mused out loud.